Well, everyone, welcome to the Shorter Artist Hour, where I talk to my superbly talented friends that I think the world needs to know more about. And we might not talk for a full hour, but that's okay because it's the Shorter Artist Hour and because I'm Susan Shorter. Hello. And today we're talking to my friend Tom Fleming, who is a famous comic book artist and prolific illustrator whose career just fascinates me. I saw that you were just you did a signing at Cape Fear Collectibles, and you also just did Awesome Con. You sound very busy. How was
Yeah,
everything?
yeah, actually, because summer, that's when my convention season starts. So, actually, everything actually went really well. The signing at Cape Fear Collectibles is like one of the first local events that I've done in a long time. I don't do a whole lot of local stuff, and it was one of the best local single signings at like a shop that I've ever done.
Nice. So you're in North
So yeah,
Carolina?
in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yep.
Never
And the thing with those kind of signings, you never know what you're going to get. So it's I've had experiences where you show up and it's literally just it's me and the crickets.
Yeah.
Um, but this was not that case. They really did a great job with combining a bunch of different tournaments, like gaming tournaments,
Oh,
with the
cool.
signing. So they were, it was really smart because they guaranteed foot traffic no matter what.
Yeah.
And my career is kind of like flip flop between gaming and the comic book stuff. So,
Yeah, those are
you
your
know,
people.
yeah, exactly. So, the Magic the Gathering crowd was there and, all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, it went really well. Awesome Con. Awesome Con was kind of weird because it was Father's Day weekend. It was competing with Heroes Con, and it was Juneteenth. And in DC, Juneteenth is a major thing.
Sure.
So
I've never
yeah.
been to Awesome Con. I've heard good things, but
I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's a good reason for me to visit my brother-in-law and the family and stuff.
nice.
So I get to see family, do the show. I can't. It would be unfair to compare it to Dragon Con and Lux Con and like my real killer shows. But
Sure.
it's a really fun show and it's really family friendly.
Awesome. Well, we met at a LuxCon, and as everybody knows, I'm a child of the 80s. And when you and I were having a beer up there and you started telling me all this stuff, I'm shamed that I didn't know your name, but I'm not into comic books or anything. But when you started telling me all the stuff that you worked on, I was freaking floored. And as you know, my husband is a huge fan of the wrestling, the WWE, and all that. So he supplied a couple questions he wanted me to ask too. But
Cool.
first off, please tell everybody what you did for that company and how that even came about.
All right. So it was completely unexpected. I was at the time working part time at a pizza shop, flipping pizzas for about 125 bucks a week, which covered my share of the rent and my student loan. So
Nice.
there was no other spending going on. It was in the beginning, and I answered an ad in the New York Times that
Wow.
and it was just a generic ad. No, absolutely no idea it was the WWF, now the WWE, but
Yeah.
just responded to the ad. They wanted me to come in based on some samples I sent for an interview. And when I saw that it was in Stamford, Connecticut, and I lived on Long Island in New York, I was like, okay, well, this is not an opportunity for any kind of like daily job, but you just see what happens, feel it out. I was making pizzas, so it wasn't like my world was lit on fire at the time.
Sure.
Um, and went into Stamford, Connecticut, and at the time it was an office building downtown Stamford, and I walked in and I immediately saw some wrestling posters hanging in the hallways, and I was like, oh, this must be like the advertising agency or the marketing company
Yeah.
group that does WWF stuff. And as I'm walking down the hall, a very famous, legendary bodybuilder, Tom Platz, walks down the hall, and we cross paths. And I was, at the time, I was very into Joe Weider's Muscle and Fitness and all that kind of stuff, and I immediately recognized him. And it was kind of a weird thing for a celebrity to walk by, and that's when I started getting the feeling that I might be somewhere, bigger than just an advertising agency.
Yeah.
Um, and then sat in with the interview, and that's when they told, no, that we are the WWF, and we'd like to put you on like a 2 or 3 day kind of trial period. And then it went to 2 to 3 weeks, and then 2 to 3 weeks went to almost a decade. So yeah, that was starting in 1991.
So were
So it
you
was pretty much.
freelance for them or like regular paycheck with insurance kind of thing?
So no, it was actually work for hire, but it was freelance in-house. So I was going there, working in a cubicle in the art department,
Wow.
9 to 5, and many days longer. But the hours were very standard, and in that industry, it's so competitive that if you really want to keep your job, whatever, you show up early, you leave late, that kind of thing. And I was like 23, 24 years old or so, and just, not a wrestling fan, knew nothing about wrestling at all. I knew who Hulk Hogan and I think Sergeant Slaughter was.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't even know who the Ultimate Warrior was. I mean, yeah, like I was completely ignorant of pro wrestling. I knew Andre the Giant, the
Sure.
household name that everybody knows.
Yeah.
And just started working there as a kid, in a cubicle as one of their main illustrators, doing the merchandise. I started doing merchandise art, which my very first project was, if for all those wrestling fans out there, it was a Legion of Doom poster in the back alleyway. They wanted me to paint an alleyway photorealistically so that they could superimpose the wrestlers in Photoshop on top of my painting and have them work in with the background. That was the very first project. Then I was doing merchandise art, this and that, until they started getting confidence in me. And that's when I started designing the actual costumes, or at least adding. They had about four, maybe 3 or 4 different designers submitting designs. And it got to the point where Vince McMahon started picking mine and my boss's designs almost every time we met.
Nice.
And eventually me and her became the main costume designers.
So
Yeah.
cool. So did you interact with Vince at all?
The most yes, I interacted with Vince, but it was on a very limited kind of level. It was basically during design presentation. We would have our designs, have them all mounted on blackboard. We would
Yeah.
bring them in a stack up to Vince's office. You bring it to the top floor, which was like the penthouse, and the doors open, and you walk down these marble hallways, and there was these
Wow.
giant doors at the end, and you walk in, and it overlooked Stamford, Connecticut, and he had a big table there, and we would lay out all the designs, and he would just kind of start from the beginning and walk down the line and look at them, and you kind of like hope while he's walking past yours he stops,
Yeah.
and takes it, and then he'll just stop for a second, think, and be like, boom, I like this one right here, and you hope it's yours. So
Yeah. So were there
and
just
then
like
he would ask
oh, go ahead.
questions.
Sorry, go
Sorry
ahead.
about that. He would just ask questions about the designs and things like that. So that was, to answer the question, that was pretty much the limit of interaction with Vince, was that, and a little bit backstage during the debut of the costumes that we designed.
That's cool. You were telling me about, it wasn't the Thanksgiving piece, which was really awesome too, but one of the big posters that you did, it was going to be like a wall hanging or something in the corporate headquarters.
Okay,
Or-
so that two different projects.
Yeah.
There was the Thanksgiving illustration, which was the promotion for the Survivor Series '93, and that was the first time that they ever trusted that I to give me the actual illustration, the fully painted work for a major pay-per-view event. Then there was a painting that I did that they they wanted a Hall of Fame mural painted in the lobby of the headquarters
Yeah.
at Titan Towers. They got some quotes on from muralists, and the prices were literally out of control. They didn't want to spend that kind of money to have somebody paint something that size. So they asked me if I thought that I could paint it, reasonable. It was probably 35 inches tall or so. It was not a small painting, but about um 20 by 35 or so is the painting.
Yeah.
And they what they did was they wanted me to paint it as photorealistically of the wrestler, so that they can blow it up photographically 6.5 feet by 13 feet and hang it in the lobby. And in order to blow up something that large, it had to be really tight. So
Sure.
it was, to say the least, a challenge.
It's
But
gorgeous.
thanks. To this day, I think it's it's one of the most challenging pieces that I've ever done, and I think there's 38 portraits in the painting, and they had to be, arranged and rearranged depending on who Vince was in good graces with at the
Oh,
time. And I'm not even kidding. Every day that I would come in,
oh.
somebody Vince would be pissed off at somebody else, and he would say, pull Shawn Michaels out of the painting, put so and so in.
But that's
And
traditional art. It's not just like Photoshop where you can just boop boop and move.
so, well, so we had to figure out how to compensate for this. And so what I did, I drew every wrestler individually, copied them off on a like a Xerox machine, photocopier, cut them out, sized them whatever I needed to, and I created this collage, the size of the painting I was going to do.
Yeah.
And then when there was changes, I literally can just pull the wrestler out, copy somebody else off, and place them and rearrange it a little bit, and it would be a slight revision instead of like a massive redraw.
That's
So it
smart.
was kind of, yeah, it had to be strategic, and there was a lot of time put into that project. Um, and then the challenge was, okay, now that there's the detail and everything we need in this layout, how do I get it without losing that detail onto the watercolor paper to start painting?
Yeah.
And I located a local company that was able to send my watercolor paper through their press. And the most unbelievable kind of phenomenon happened because of the texture of the watercolor paper, the slight texture. When they sent it through the copy machine, they apologized to me, and there's nothing we can do about it, but for some reason it's not setting, and therefore the Xerox was actually like a charcoal drawing that you can erase. And I was like, this is absolutely perfect. Like, it was
Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah. And I could actually take a kneaded eraser and dab the Xerox residue off of it, and it left a very faint line. And I was able to just completely paint over it, and it just made the process, unbelievably easier than,
Yeah.
trying to work over black Xerox line.
What a blessing in disguise. So is a watercolor your go-to? I know you also do a lot in acrylic as well. Is one more comfortable than the other?
I do very little in acrylic. I do probably 90% watercolor with some watercolor. Color pencil is my go-to. And then when I want to kind of knock things back or richen things up or darken things, I'll go in with an airbrush and hit it with some liquid acrylic, like almost like a dusting.
Right on. Well, I saw the acrylic because I was doing some Tom research before our little chat here, and I saw on YouTube you had some like Jerry's Artorama art instruction videos that
Yes.
you did. So is art is art instruction something that like you've done in the past that you like doing? Do you see
Okay,
TV?
so
Yeah.
yeah, there's a little story behind that.
Okay.
Uh, Back then, when I made those videos, that was actually part of my agreement that I didn't realize I was agreeing to.
Oh,
Yeah, I did a how-to video, and it was how to paint fantasy pinups, and I did a painting of Deja Thoris from John Carter, Warlord of Mars,
yeah.
um, on camera. There was like maybe five different cameras, very, like they thought it was going to be like Bob Ross kind of thing.
Oh,
And they thought I was going to do a full illustration in an hour. And I said, guys, it's Monday. I need till like Thursday.
yeah.
So I was like, you guys better get your editors on steroids because there's going to be some major editing if you want this to be, anywhere near an hour.
Yeah.
So they wound up getting it down to, I think, about 2.5 hours or so, which was pretty incredible. And did the time lapse thing. So I would paint one arm in like real time, and the other arm they would show like the time lapse of like the quick painting. And it was actually a kind of cool thing and possibly the most stressful moment of my illustration career.
Oh man.
Yeah, it because when we work, we don't necessarily um we don't I can't necessarily verbalize what I'm doing. A lot of it's instinct, intuition, whatever, and you're following it, and experience, and you're just working.
Yeah.
In that case, making a how-to video, you actually have to explain everything you're doing so that the viewer can understand. And I realized, like, oh my God, and there's no like, oh man, I screwed that up. So, like, I'll take
Yeah.
a break, chill out. It was literally just having to work straight through the illustration and explain everything that I was doing.
And that
And
takes you out of the zone too. If you're not in the right mindset, it shows in the art, I think.
100%. It was like I remember taking a break for lunch and calling my wife and saying, this is I think I might quit. I literally, it was the first time in my, I don't quit anything.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first times where I was like, I don't think I can do this. It's that stressful. And I dug down deep and went back in and settled down, and it actually worked out just fine. But getting back to the question, one of the things after we finished that video, one of the things that they said was like, okay, now we have to do like 10 to 15 5-minute short videos of like 5-minute art lessons.
Yeah.
And I I didn't remember ever seeing anything like that in the contract. And I'm not sure if there actually was. I think it was a verbal agreement that I didn't even, what I was unaware of. So in my mind, I'm like, you can't teach art in 5 minutes. It's just like
Yeah.
ridiculous. So, but you know, got to be professional. This is what they wanted. So I came up with a bunch of different ideas, and I was like, basically, I'll do the best I can in 5 minutes. And they were really cheesy, kind of very simple videos. And I learned all about the YouTube haters and
Oh
like
no.
some of the real crappy comments you get from 13-year-olds in wherever they may be
Yeah.
around the world, that's never picked up a pencil, but they love the keyboard. And anyway, they were super unrehearsed.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, you know what? There's a really good chance that nobody's ever going to see these, but they'll be out there, whatever. One of them is called Using Salt, and it has 2.6 million hits.
Oh my
And I
God.
was, yeah, I was very wrong about the amount of people that were going to see these videos.
Oh
So,
wow. That's
yeah.
incredible. Well,
So,
I got so many
yeah.
questions for you, but one you've hit on around it a few times, but you came up and became, pretty famous and successful in the days before we could just send somebody to our website or email a bunch of publishers. Like, what did that path look for you? I mean, okay, you got that one job from the ad and the showing up and being a badass, but then how do you transition from there to all the other awesome gigs that you've gotten?
Okay, so and this is the challenge. So I graduated from art school in the worst time you could possibly graduate. I graduated in the late 80s where everything was transitioning from traditional to digital and the computer age started. So I was taught by all old school kind of techniques and the process of how to go and get work. And they don't teach you business in art school. They
Yeah,
are starting to now.
they didn't mind
Um,
it either.
no, they literally, you'd learn how to draw and paint if you're lucky, and then they just give you a push and say good luck.
Yep.
And there's some super, super talented people out there that have absolutely no sense of business and are struggling. And then there's others that have mediocre talent that they know how to market themselves, and that's how you make a living at doing art. You have to combine the two.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge. I had to basically back to community college. One of the best $55 I've ever spent was a basic introduction course to Photoshop. I took a web design course, Photoshop, all the basics. I didn't even know how to scan an image when I graduated.
Wow.
So yeah. So basically the way things were back then was you basically took snapshots like pictures
Yeah.
of your work, went to Walmart, had them developed in the 1 hour photo, got the actual, hope they come out good, and then put them in an envelope and send them out to art directors that probably have a stack of submissions sitting on their desk.
Yeah.
And you don't even know if they're going to even see, because like email, you don't get a response. It's not easy. So you just hope that they see it.
Yeah.
um and this is months later that you might get a response. You probably won't, but every once in a while you might get a response. And so it was a brutal process of trying to get work. Now, I guess, in the big picture, only the people that were really diligent and doing that process were the ones sitting on the desk.
Yeah.
Not So now it's easy, everyone can email and hit submissions. So now the editors and art directors probably have hundreds and
Yeah.
hundreds instead of dozens and dozens.
Super saturated market now.
Super, yeah,
Yeah.
crazy, super saturated. um so basically it was like a lot of word of mouth. Fortunately, I lived in New York City. Well, I lived right outside of New York City, in Long Island. And when the WWF kind of went sour, and when I say went sour, it was right at the time when they started getting hit with a lot of scandals in the press.
Mm.
And it was one of the biggest times where there was real struggle at the company, and they started really reducing costs and laying off people. I was the last freelancer to work in the art department. My boss, we had such a great relationship, and she tried to keep me on for as long as she could,
Good.
until the day she came over to my desk with some tears in her eyes, and I was like, oh boy, it's that time.
Yeah.
And I still work for them, even though I was laid off from working in house. I still did some freelance jobs from my studio. But fortunately, my buddy Dave DeVries was working for DC Comics doing trading card art, and he had a gallery show in New York City. And he said, hey man, grab your portfolio and head down. I'll introduce you to one of my editors.
Nice.
And it was never on my radar to ever professionally work in comics.
Were you into
I
comics?
totally, I grew up a Marvel guy, huge. Like, I think I was such a fan of comics and such a fanboy that I think it was too much of a dream to actually think I would
Yeah.
be working in comics.
Yeah. Don't look directly at
So,
the sun kind of thing.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I always thought that my what my focus was fantasy art, doing the wizards, dragons, the more kind of realistically photo referenced genre that that's what I was doing throughout college, kind of science fiction, fantasy, editorial type illustration, stuff like that. And that's where I was heading until I got the job at the WWF. And then he introduced me to his editor. I went down there and they flipped through my portfolio of wrestlers and college work.
Yeah.
And he, I mean, the words almost came out of his mouth. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Oh,
That's the way it seemed to me.
yeah.
And I was, so he was basically like, well, he goes, I could clearly see talent, but you have a whole portfolio of wrestling stuff and no comic book work. So I don't know what we can do for you, but, we'll let you know. And I walked away kind of like, oh, all right. Well, he did throw a few compliments out there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. 2 weeks later, I get a call when editors and art directors actually called. Um, there was no email and stuff.
Yeah.
So I got the call that the illustrator that they hired to work on the Superman trading card for the DC Master Series could not get Superman's face right. And he said, I'll tell you what, you did so much portrait work and stuff at the WWF that we'll give you till tomorrow to fax us some faces in pencil. And if Mike Carlin, the editor of Superman, approves, you got the job. And I was just like, holy
Yeah.
crap.
Did your heart stop?
Uh, they're starting me out with Superman if I get the job.
Wow.
And yeah, I just got literally went to the drawing board and just started doing Superman faces and faxing them in. And within maybe a half a dozen or so, he was just like, boom, you got it. He's like, all right. He goes, this is the deal. It's during the death of Superman. So the card is going to be Superman on the front side and Doomsday on the back side. And since you've never done superhero work before, we're going to have one of our in-house artists do some thumbnails for a general pose, and then you can go and do your thing with
Okay.
that pose. And I was like, okay, fair enough,
Yeah.
and Kerry Gamel, for all you comic book fans out there, was the one who did the thumbnails.
Nice.
And I wound up doing the painting, which that now when I look back I'm like, ooh, all right,
Really?
it's not. Yeah, I couldn't do my thing because I was working off somebody else's sketches,
I get that.
but it got approved first time through, no revisions. um Went right through, and then because of the success of that, they wound up on the next trading card set, they wound up giving me the actual Death of Superman trading card, which was his funeral, the funeral procession, the Doomsday card, and the Fall of Metropolis in the next set. And that started everything. That's when I sent those over to Marvel because they were doing an X-Men set, and then I got some X-Men work, and then it kind of snowballs from there.
Wow. It just had to have been almost like an out of body experience when you finally get to work for your dream client.
It was so nerve-wracking. And yes, it was, because once I got the job at Marvel, DC was awesome, and it's just kind of a weird thing because I'm such a Marvel fan
Yeah.
that starting with Superman was like, oh my God, by far the most
Mhm.
famous comic book character ever, starting with that. But there wasn't that heart, that childhood thing, um, like I had the connection with Marvel.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things like, holy, like this is
Yeah.
still awesome kind of thing. And then Marvel was a whole different story. When I started with them, they were just giving me completely abstract, like these obscure characters that that nobody's heard of. My first card was a character called Forearm, and
Yeah, I don't know that one.
yeah, nobody knows. He was a character in a group called X. Uh, it was in the comic X Force, and he was in a group of evil villains, and he was basically a combination of Hercules and the Hulk with four
Okay.
arms.
So,
So knowing that, I was like, all right, this is how it works with freelance. You have to do things so that they lead into the next job. And I heard that there was a Incredible Hulk Super Nintendo Sega Genesis project coming up at Marvel. So I painted Forearm to look like the Hulk.
smart.
And it worked. They wound up giving me the job, and unfortunately, I finished the job, got paid for it, and the project got canned and never actually hit the shelves.
Okay.
Um, for reasons I'm not even sure. Sometimes that just happens. I think it had to do with the storyline that was going on in the Hulk comic.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, that was a dream. Now, Hulk was my favorite.
Okay.
So that
Yeah.
now we're talking dream come true, working on favorite character of all time, or second favorite.
Are there any
Nobody.
cards, pieces that you think of when you're like, that was it? Like, or I really nailed it with that one. That was a favorite piece or something.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Uh, and actually recently Upper Deck Marvel are now they're just giving me my choice of characters in the trading card sets,
Cool.
and it's literally like just you know uh, it's it's nothing but fun. And
Awesome.
now I'm painting A-list characters, um, and they're giving me full sets. So the last cards that came out was about a month and a half or 2 months ago, and it was an Avengers trading card set. And they gave me the whole subset of all the Silver Age characters that I grew up with.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was just awesome. I mean, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Falcon, Hawkeye, She-Hulk, um, geez, I mean, it was just one great character after another.
Yeah.
And then they wound up calling me up and saying, listen, we have a big problem. We need this special project, 11 Avengers in one painting that can be broken up into 9 different cards, and we need it in 10 days. And which is, you never get dream jobs with a reasonable deadline.
Yeah.
So
You make it work.
yeah, and they said we'll double the fee and we'll throw in a bonus if you can hit the deadline on time. And this was a week after I just did this insane NFT project with wrestling in the wrestling world, and I did 23 paintings in 25 days.
Oh my God.
Completely burnt out. Never worked at that pace before. I was literally waking up in the morning and painting for about 16 hours a day, sleeping and waking up in the morning and painting. And that's what I did for 23 days straight, 25 days straight. And and did and did 23 painting. It was an insane. I've never worked at that pace before. Finished it up, was completely burnt out, and then Marvel Upper Deck calls me with my dream job. So that's the
Hell
way
yeah.
it works.
Yeah. When it rains,
um,
it pours.
yeah, and it was like, and to be honest, that project at 11 characters would normally take me probably a month and a half to do, and they gave me 10 days. So um it was one of those situations where i I didn't want to say yes, but saying no was not part of the
Yeah.
question. It was like, I have to say yes. It's a matter of figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of pride in my professional. I am very professional as far as taking my deadlines seriously. And with some companies, I'm actually known for the guy to go to to hit the
Mhm.
deadlines when you know when things go bad.
Yeah,
So
that's
I've been
something I
called
pride
up,
myself on as well. It's so
and
important.
yeah, good, because you have to.
Hmm.
Um, there's too many people out there. I never want to be typical. And it is typical for artists to be temperamental and flaky and kind of uh a little bit too sensitive towards like, oh, I'm stressed, and I believe me, during deadlines, I go through that whole thing where I have to text my editor and be like, listen, I want to do the best job possible. I am completely stressed out. Is there any way to extend it a day or two? Nothing crazy.
Sure.
And most of the time they're like, yeah, there's wiggle room. And that's when I know that my stress level is affecting the quality. So if they say no, which they have, I dig down deep and I
Yeah.
figure out a way to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But it does help incredibly when you do get that a little bit of extension.
Yeah. Well, whenever I was in art school, one of the best lessons that I got from my illustration professor, she like, you might be the 10 out of 10 most talented person, but if the person who's 8 out of 10 with talents meets all the deadlines and they're a joy to work with and just all of that wonderful stuff, they're going to get the job over you if you're the one flaking out and being emotional and like you mentioned. So I've always kept that in mind with approaching any job. It's like deadlines and all, it's a business first because it's a business for them, but it doesn't
Yep,
mean that, but it's an art business, so we can have our creativity and all that, but at the end of the day it is business.
exactly. Well said. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is an art director or editor's ass is on the line
Yeah.
when they hire you,
Yes.
and you cannot, if you jeopardize that, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, depending on the deadline, if you deliver and it depends who you are, if you deliver like a killer illustration, a lot of the times the editors will kind of forget about the deadline, but basically there's no way that you can count on that.
Yeah.
That most of the time they're going to remember that they were like chomping at the bit. When is this guy going to get this in?
Yeah.
And then they're relieved when the successful piece comes in, but they don't even know it's going to be successful until they see it. So
For sure.
you kill your deadline and then hand in a mediocre piece, you're done.
Yeah.
And
100%.
you're only as good as your last illustration a lot of times.
Interesting. Well, I know you also do a lot of gaming stuff. Are you into gaming? Is that part of who you are too? No?
No, no. And that's a tough one with the fans, because I haven't done a whole lot of gaming, but I've done Magic the Gathering, I've done World of Warcraft, I did a bunch of stuff back in the day for White Wolf Publishing when they were a pretty big thing.
Yeah,
Um, and other, I've worked for other games, but those are the big ones. Um, I have never I've never had a moment of Magic the Gathering in my life,
me
and
either.
it's tough to say that to fans that are coming up and getting stuff signed. And
Sure.
the Magic fans are hardcore. Um, they love that game, and they are into the art. Some of the most appreciative fans out there are Magic the Gathering fans for art. They were the first ones to ever voluntarily tip you for signing cards.
Oh,
It
sweet.
was just, yeah, it was just standard in the market to, like nobody, it was taken for granted. Like, yeah, they sometimes fans would come up with stacks of cards and just be like, can you sign these?
Oh,
And you're in the middle of a busy convention and stuff, and sometimes you'd be like, well, you got to leave them here and come back, that kind of thing.
sure.
And the first time I ever went to Gen Con, I saw all these cans on the magic artists' tables, and the cans were tip jars.
Oh,
And I was like, "What's all this about?" And they're like, "The magic fans are appreciative, and they absolutely will tip you every time you sign for every card you sign." I was like,
Sweet.
oh, this is incredible.
Yeah,
Like wow. The artist didn't even really ask for it. They just started doing that.
that's so nice.
Yeah. So and not only that, but pretty generous tips sometimes,
Nice.
which which when you're making a living as an artist, especially in the beginning,
Yeah,
every little bit helps.
absolutely.
And
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say we all know what it's like to have a slow convention.
Yeah,
It's a nightmare.
absolutely. But yeah, you mentioned conventions. Are you doing a LuxCon again this year or Gen Con, Dragon Con? What's your future look like?
So okay, so this year I'm doing a few more conventions than I normally do. Um, the answer to EluxCon is if I get juried in, I'm doing it every year because Dragon Con and EluxCon
Yeah,
are so different, and it's hard for me to say which one is truly. I mean, Dragon Con, I can't say enough about the people
yeah,
in the art department. They're the best. I mean, Dragon Con, I've been doing that for almost 3 decades now, and I can't even imagine missing a Dragon Con. That's why the COVID shutdown was brutal. I was like, Labor Day weekend having free. What is this? That kind of thing. So LuxCon though is I don't care who you are, you cannot go to a LuxCon and leave uninspired.
absolutely.
It's
I,
it's just yeah, yeah. I mean, walking in and Boris and Julie are there,
yeah. No,
first of
my
all.
first year, I thought my head was gonna explode, and I'm just sad on all the years I missed out before I knew it existed. So, yeah, it's incredible. I wasn't gonna go this year just because I wanted to have more time to create more new work to present to everybody and all that kind of stuff. But as I was getting closer and closer, it's like I can't miss it. I mean, I got to see all my friends. I got to see what they've been doing, and I just can't wait.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So I have a little story for LuxCon also.
yeah,
So uh, way back in the day when the concept of a LuxCon came around, um, I heard about it and I was like, yeah, it's mostly original art kind of thing, this and that, and it's so the main show is the cream of the crop and all this stuff, and it was super intimidating seeing some of the names that were showing there. And I have to say, probably 10 years went by of me wanting to submit and never submitting
yeah,
because of a few factors. One, um, fear of rejection. And even with all the stuff that I've done and everything,
yeah,
that's how top tier DeluxeCon is. But
yeah,
there was that fear of like, if I don't submit, then I'll never know.
yeah.
Um, you know, about getting rejected. But
Never
the
be the
other
one
thing
to tell
is
yourself no.
exactly, yes. The other factor was the huge um I mean, it's a 5 day show, so you have to commit. It's a big commitment of hotel, time away from the drawing table, and the whole thing. Where I was like, man, and people, no matter who they were saying, yeah, it's hit or miss. If you sell some original art, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh God, going from North Carolina to Pennsylvania and having a miss for 5 days, that kind of
Sure.
thing. There was so many things that were kind of holding me back from pulling the trigger. And then flash forward 10 years, I started a yoga mat company with a childhood friend of mine with
Oh,
my fine art pieces, which were in the shape of yoga mats. It was his idea.
clever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started doing these yoga mats, and through the yoga mat, through the through the website, I get an order from Patrick Wilshire, who runs and
Yeah.
owns Illuxcon, and I recognized the name, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, like thanks for the, I wasn't even sure if he knew who I was or not.
Yeah.
I thought he did. And I just reached out and I said, thanks for the order. I'll get these mats out. Wow. Really appreciate it. And he responded, like, so when are you going to do my show? And I was like, oh my God, I think this is the year. It has to be. And he said, well, the jury for the main show is over. But we have this thing called Showcase. And you know, the tables, go on sale, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. And he goes, if you want to give that a try as an introduction,
Yeah.
uh, you know, here's the process and the dates and all that kind of stuff. So I did. I was like, all right, that's less of a commitment. It was only Friday, Saturday, and um sold the least amount at Showcase that I've ever sold ever doing professional art.
Wow.
It was yes. And I realized, like, I don't know if it was just my stuff in that setting. And people go and love to drink, and it's a big party at
Yeah,
show
it's a
at
party.
so and I know people that have done very well in Showcase. Um, I just personally did not do very well, but it was such a fulfilling experience of going to the big show and seeing everybody there, meeting Boris, who was literally a childhood hero.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then having a really wonderful connection and experience with Patrick and Jeannie.
Yeah.
And it just became like, oh my God, there was a meaningful connection there that I didn't have with a lot of other shows.
Yeah.
And my buddy Will, who accompanies me to Dragon Con and
Yeah.
AluxCon, and he acts, he loves it, has a great time, and he really helps me out setting up and all that stuff. He convinced me to give the main show a shot the following year. And he said, dude, you have to just submit to the main show, get your answer, and we have to book a hotel in the main hotel at the DoubleTree and do the whole thing. And I was like, oh man. And he convinced me. I did it. Was nervous as hell going up there, and it was right after COVID. I think maybe 50 people all the whole 5 days stopped by my booth, and I did bigger numbers than Dragon Con.
That's amazing.
So it was absolutely amazing. I was like, oh my God, this is a way different beast than anything I've ever experienced. Oh my God, I love this show. So,
I can't imagine you being nervous though. That blows my mind.
oh, I get nervous. Are you kidding me? I get my
So confident.
I it I it's a really weird. I'm a Gemini, and there's this whole duality thing of like everything. There's one side and up. So I have a lot of confidence, and I have a lot of insecurity,
Yeah,
and they
I
battle
get
each
that.
other constantly. Um, overall, I really try to be positive because I believe positivity attracts positivity.
Sure.
We're energy beings, and you put out positive energy, and positive energy will come back. I truly believe that. So it's yeah, just like any professional athlete and stuff before a big game or something, no matter how at what level they're at, they're like, yeah, the butterflies, you
Yeah.
just never know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and let's
I
face
need to.
it,
Oh, go ahead.
no, just it's you put in, you pack the van, do the whole setup thing, the
Yeah.
travel, the expense, and most of all, the self-esteem thing going on of being like, all right, I'm with the big boys and big girls now.
Yeah.
Um, am I a big boy? Is this gonna pan out? And
Yeah,
I
imposter
really,
syndrome, man.
yeah, yes, exactly. I was just like, am I gonna leave here with my tail between my legs? Because in the big show, I didn't want to leave. Like, that was a great experience. even though that was part of it,
Yeah,
I wanted it to be financially successful along with the great experience. And it was.
absolutely. Yeah, no,
So yeah,
I have yet to submit to the main show, even though I was just given the advice, don't tell yourself no. But I've done the showcase a couple times and I love that. But I will submit at some point. But yeah, it's a whole nother beast because a regular convention, it's just normal people, some creatives, people that do different styles and stuff. At a LexCon, it's like all your heroes in one room, you
yeah,
know? It's
yeah,
surreal. So they're the
yes.
ones who's looking at my art, and yeah, it screws with your head a little bit.
Yeah, it exactly. It does screw with your head a little bit, but then when you settle in
Yeah,
and when the dust settles and you're like, I think I'm friends with some of my heroes now. Like
absolutely.
it's a really cool thing for that to come full circle
Yeah,
and and be like, wow, when I was 16 years old, I never thought that, I'd be hanging out with so and so and
yeah,
and shooting, talking shop and all that stuff, and them asking me for, like little tips and stuff. It's
sure.
really cool.
Yeah, like Julie
Yeah,
Bell knows who I am. I have like tons of her old calendars down here, and I have her books. I was like, she
yeah.
knows my name. That's unheard of.
Exactly. It's one of the things that it was great. The first year we went there, and Will, it was the one show that Will and I start went to the show for the first time together. Usually I've been doing shows for years, and then he joins me
Yeah,
at Dragon Con and and a couple of other shows. But at IlluxCon, we started together, and Boris is one. I mean, Frank Frazetta, Boris, and Michael Whalen were the three. Those were the three guys that why I wanted to paint. Um, and I've met two out of the three. I never got a chance to meet Frazetta before he passed away. I did meet and spend some time with Ellie, his wife, um, but Boris and Michael Whalen couldn't be nicer people, and it's always
yeah,
awesome when you meet your heroes and they're wonderful people along with brilliantly talented.
absolutely.
Um,
And so
and
modest. Like most of them just act like, oh yeah, I like to draw, golly. It's just
Yes, yeah, exactly. And and a part of it is that we all have different styles. So no matter what you're doing, if you're like super realistic and painting really tight like Boris does and stuff, there's always the guy that's painting, like loosely and expression, and you kind of gravitate towards what you don't do.
yeah,
And that's the wonderful thing about everyone's so damn talented there that you just you can't help but admire what everyone's doing.
yeah.
So one of the little struggles that I had was the first time I ever went to LuxCon with Will was he walked in with a budget and a pretty big budget, and he saw one of Boris's paintings hanging on the wall, and that sucker wound up buying a Boris original.
Oh
And I
my
was just like,
God.
yeah. And I was like, yeah, so like, oh my God, you own a Boris. And now he owns two Borises. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
I own a
So
Donato drawing now, and that's huge to me. But I will own a Julie one day. So we'll see.
yeah, yeah, I picked up a piece of one of Donato's one of his large preliminaries for one of his covers a few years ago at Dragon Con.
Mm.
It's a beautiful, beautiful drawing. I have it hanging in the studio right in front of me.
Oh, he's one of my
Uh,
heroes. Major.
Donato.
Yeah, oh yeah. And he's such a nice
Yeah,
guy. So thank God.
yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, super guy. He wound up we actually both went to Syracuse University. He graduated, I think, 2 years after I did.
Did you know
So
him in school?
I didn't. Nope, he didn't take illustration. He was in the fine arts school,
Okay.
believe it or not. Yeah, and yeah, and ironically becomes like the biggest science fiction fantasy artist out there.
A little bit.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, I do have a couple more questions for you. But like, man, we've talked almost an hour already. Being kid from the 80s, Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like you've done some awesome artwork for them. Have you met the band? Tell me about the work.
Yes, all of the above. So okay, so this is also a lesson for any young artists and stuff that um it's very hard for me if a project makes sense financially.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to. I'm not temperamental, and I don't say no. Well, I say no now, but back a few years ago and stuff, the schedule wasn't as packed. So, um, if anything, if the project made sense, I would say yes, and do the project regardless of the profile, how high profile it was, low pro, whatever, because basically you want to put projects on the calendar, and you want to always have work and be working. So this guy approaches me, and he has his own creator owned comic book series, and the company was called Incendium, and the comic was called Eternal Descent, which was not a high profile comic at all. But we negotiated a price. He instead of working for Marvel and DC and stuff where you have like a 60-day wait to get paid, he was paying immediately upon approval of the project, which was huge at the
Very cool.
time. Um, and um, and so I did this series of comics for him, and we developed a really good relationship, a really good working relationship. And he threw it out there. He said, "Listen," he goes, "I'm also working on some negotiations with some heavy metal bands and artists and stuff." And he's like, one of them is Iron Maiden. Do you have any interest in doing Iron Maiden work if the job comes through? And of course, my answer was, hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
But after you've been in the industry for as long as I have, there is so many empty promises and a lot of big projects that are thrown out there. Very few actually come through. Everybody has, whether it's intentional to get you hooked in or whether it's just, things are just difficult to come together, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, there's a huge probability that whoever is talking big is something's going to come up that's going to kind of kill the project.
Yeah.
Well, I don't hear anything about Iron Maiden and I was working with Lexi throughout the time with other projects, his own creator owned projects. And 5 years later, he sends me a message. Hey man, just letting you know the Maiden stuff came through. You ready to work on some covers? And I just went, oh my God, somebody in the industry actually is good for their word.
Wow.
So I can, yeah. So usually by the time that happens, they have an upper tier more and they have people that they're working with now. But I stuck with him the whole time, and he came through and he said, let's give you two covers right now, two out of the five. And I did the covers. They loved them. They gave me one more cover. I did that one, and then hooked me up with VIP tickets to the Charlotte, North Carolina show, where I did meet Steve Harris backstage in the VIP area. We got our picture taken
That's
together,
so
doing
cool. Yeah.
yes, that was absolute fanboy moment. Um, I really didn't expect to meet. I wanted to meet Bruce Dickinson pretty badly, but
Sure.
Steve Harris is the founding member of the band, and honored that he was the one to come back. And I was wearing my artwork on a T-shirt at the time. He signed the T-shirt for me, and we got our picture taken together, and that was a moment where, oh my God, when I was 16 years old in my friend's basement who were in a heavy metal band playing Iron Maiden,
Yeah.
if we could see into the future that I would someday be working with Iron Maiden, none of us would have believed it. So yeah, that was a full circle, awesome experience.
Yeah, I love that. I just experienced something similar 2 nights ago. Reason why my brain's still mush is I drove out to Cincinnati to meet Debbie Gibson. I don't know, you know who she is, pop princess
Oh,
from
I
the
know
80s.
Debbie Gibson. I love Debbie Gibson in the
Yeah, well,
80s.
I spent the evening hanging out with her and her dancers and her singers, and I gave her a nice piece of art, and she is just wonderful. And I had one of those surreal moments of remembering, like, if I could tell my 10 or 11-year-old self that was dancing around and singing to her music that you would be VIP giving her art and it's just, yeah, crazy, crazy.
Wow. So, how did that come about?
It's so wild. It's just it kind of came about by like who you're nice to. I met this guy at one of her concerts prior, and he was super nice, giving everybody bottled waters while we wait. And so since he was so nice, when we got inside, I bought him a beer and we just kind of enjoyed the concert. We were both in the front together. Turns out he's super connected to the band. And through that, and he liked my art, then the dancers found out who I was, and then I became friends with them through social media, and it just progressed from there. And
Wow.
yeah, it's just crazy. Yay, internet.
Yeah, right. Yeah, isn't that cool how things come around and
Yeah.
you just never know who you're talking to, how it could connect somewhere
Yeah.
else. I mean, a couple of years ago when the wrestling stuff started coming full circle, I had no idea that the stuff I did in wrestling was the most impactful thing that I've done in my career to pop culture.
Yeah.
And the fans were going bananas because nobody knew that I did what I did. And one of the wrestlers contacted me and said, "Hey man, I've been seeing you posting stuff on the Facebook group. Do you have any illustration, any paintings of me?" And I looked at the name and it said Brian Clark. And I went, "Oh my God." I was like, "Dude, I don't have any paintings of you right now, but I created you." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "Dude, I created your Atom Bomb costume in I think it was 93." Yeah, and so now we're friends and we stay in touch. I did him actually a current illustration of the character Atom
Cool.
Bomb. And yeah, it's you never know how things are going to come full circle,
Yeah.
and that was a really cool thing.
And it kind of makes sense when you think about it that we would get along with the musicians and the actors because it's just that creative mindset. It's that same creative brain. It's just different art forms. So it just makes sense that we
Exactly.
would connect. So that's so
Yep.
cool. But
Yeah.
speaking of art and the internet and stuff, do you have any feelings on all this AI bullshit going on?
Okay, I do. I have um okay. So I have some mixed feelings about it.
Okay.
I promised myself when I was a kid that two things. One, I would never be a fat middle-aged man. Two, that I would never be an older person that was always yapping about how things were better during my time and when we were this is how it was.
Yeah.
So I try to stay super open-minded to everything, technology, development, and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I remember when Photoshop started, everybody was, it's cheating,
Mhm.
like that's not real art. And people still have some, for digital art, some people there
Sure.
still are prejudices and things like that. And I do understand why there would be a little bit more um, uh, um, why people would be more impressed with things done traditionally by hand than digitally to some degree.
Yeah.
Um, but let's get something clear. Doing a painting in Photoshop is not cheating. It's you can tell a mediocre paint. Now you can certainly a mediocre talented person can look more talented by using digital media the right way and things like that. But it's just another tool. Before Photoshop was the airbrush, people were painting with oils and watercolor, and the airbrush came around, and that caught all. You're not a real illustrator if you use airbrush. So no matter what happens, there's always going to be something. With AI, it's a whole nother beast of the question of copyright infringement. Um, and my take on it is this: the scraping of illustrations is not, it's being done automatically in this program, but it's not so much different then the scraping that your brain does by being influenced by different styles of art, and then your brain is processing it and spitting it out, but you have to have hand skills to do it. So I don't necessarily right now have a giant issue with the copyright infringement, because friends of mine have put prompts into the program and it spits out something. And they did actually, I was known for doing the cover for Elektra for a while for Marvel.
Yeah.
And they put Tom Fleming style Elektra, blah blah blah, and put a whole bunch of things. And they were like, let's see how close it comes to one of your illustrations, and it didn't even come close. There was no sign of copyright infringement going on. So that's definitely not an example of what's going on everywhere.
I was gonna say I've had some friends where it looked identical. They just like moved the flower to the other side, or and it's just appalling.
So yeah, it depends on the prompts, I think, and what the degree of the scraping is. So Andy Warhol years ago went to court because he was using copyrighted
Yeah.
brands and labels and things like that. And if the verdict was, if you change a certain percentage of the original image, then it is not infringed on. So it depends on what's that computer spits out of what could be, what can be looked at as infringement and what isn't, just being digitally influenced. If that's a thing. So I'm not, I'm like, how can I use this as a tool being an illustrator? And I'm like, well, if I need, if I need illustration, I can say, bodybuilder, fitness star in a tree with blah, blah, blah. And boom, all of a sudden I might have reference for Tarzan, so depending on how close that comes, because nobody wants to take the chance of infringing on the photographer's work. You gotta, kind of know where the degree of, of the scraping, is coming from. But I'm like, I don't know, can it be used as a tool for us instead of just everybody frowning on it? And,
Well, I think the
um,
frowning though comes from like the ethics of it. It's one thing they could have used stock photos, stock art, all that kind of stuff, but to have
mhm.
stolen all of our art to such a degree that you can put in my name and you will see work that looks very similar is startling. So the ethics of it, I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away. I mean, I'm
Nope.
one of those people who are like, let's just burn it to the grounds because I don't think that's possible. I just want them to be held accountable for what they
Yeah.
did instead of asking us to sign waivers or do you want to be a part of it? I don't know. But beyond that, it also taking jobs is a concern.
Okay,
So,
that's a
because
big
I know there's a lot of art directors that are controlled by the almighty dollar of the company, and they've been having to go that route because they're like, oh, well, I can just pay a membership fee to this, put in a few prompts, and there's your book cover, instead
Yep.
of having to deal with an artist, and it's costing the community some work.
At 100%, it's the same. And that, let's face it, Photoshop was the beginning of that with
Yeah.
traditional art. Digital art is it's faster, easier, everything about it to make changes and revisions to a digital piece than it is to a traditional piece. I learned that lesson working on the World of Warcraft when I handed in a painting and they said, we love the figure, but can you take the moon out of the background and put in mountains? And we need it by tomorrow morning. And I was like, oh my God, they're art directing towards digital artists, because me and Alex Horley at the time were one of the only traditional artists working on the trading card set for World of
Yeah.
Warcraft. And I realized I'm the dinosaur that's not going to get the work if I can't make those changes. So I learned Photoshop pretty much overnight. I masked out the figure, wiped out the background, went into one of my wildlife paintings that I did years ago, took the mountain range out of one of my paintings I already did, placed it in the background, stretched it out, flip flopped it, and in the morning I had a completely revised painting with mountains.
Perfect.
So
Thank God you had that other painting.
yes, exactly. And that's when I realized, like, oh my God, this is actually a real tool, not something to just frown upon. You frown upon it you when you refuse to adjust.
Sure.
That then it's just intimidating, and that's your choice. But everybody has the ability to some degree to learn new stuff.
Mhm.
It's a matter of how important it is to where you're heading.
And it
So
keeps you relevant and hireable too.
exactly. So but yeah, the AI stuff. So my mixed feelings are that I haven't done a whole lot of reading, and I haven't done a whole lot of research. So it's all kind of just things that I've heard, talked to people, blah blah. So it's it's definitely a cop. It's gonna have to have a major court case
One's
for
going
stuff.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna, just like Andy Warhol, just like, I mean, nobody even knew a couple of years ago what the heck NFTs were.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, what's an NFT and why does anybody care? So if you looked into it, there was so many different, everybody had a different opinion of what an NFT was. Originally, it was supposed to be the replacement of an original piece of art for a digital artist. Then people started selling the original art and the NFT, and that didn't make sense to me. So
Yeah.
it was all over the place. And whenever something's that indistinguishable of what it is, the market's gonna catch up with the market.
Yeah.
And when cryptocurrency crashed, uh, I don't think NFT. I don't feel that NFTs are going to make a giant comeback.
I don't think so.
Even though I did that huge project that I get back end royalties for,
Oh yeah.
so I hope it comes back. But
Nice.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it needs some kind of regulation. Yeah, but yeah, and I'm not one of those people that we all have to agree on the same thing. I just love hearing what other artists that, rely on the income of the field and everything, what your views are on what's happening with that. So thank you for sharing that. Gosh, we've gone through a lot. Do you have any advice for young kids coming up? I know you've thrown some in here and there, but anything come to mind?
Yeah, go to law school.
That's not a bad idea.
Um, God, making a living as an artist, um, it is a challenge. Let's be real. Um, you one Very few people can do it with, you need support from whether it's, starting with your parents, um, friends, and then a spouse. Um, it is a very difficult thing to just kind of take on as a career, alone. Um, really, if you really just want to be realistic, you have to hone your skills to be one of the best in the world, and then compete for your entire life with the best in the world that keeps getting better and better every year. So just be realistic about what you're getting into,
Yeah.
and know that it takes a lot of hard work, and you better have a thick skin. This is not a career for the thin skinned, and nothing can be more fulfilling. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's, I can't imagine waking up and doing anything else.
Yeah.
And I wake up every single day of my life being grateful for being able to do this, and for the people that made it possible.
Yeah. Did you always know that you were going to be an artist,
Yeah.
growing up? Yeah.
Yeah. 9 years old, I think, was my first kind of, that was the first kind of memory of me being like, oh my God, this is what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
Um, not thinking that it was a hunt. Well, I wanted to be the second baseman for the New York Yankees.
That's valid.
Um, and yeah, that, but being a Marvel Comics artist was number two.
So it was comic books that was like turned that light
Yeah,
on for you. Nice.
Yeah, and I didn't think that I had what it takes stylistically to do comic books. So I gravitated more towards fantasy because I didn't stylize very much. I was a realist and I worked from reference photos and things like that. So fantasy felt more comfortable to me,
Yeah,
but comics was that's where my heart is.
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I just absolutely adore you, and I can't wait to see you at a LuxCon, and we'll have another beer and hang out. And oh, do you have any websites or social media, anything you want people to go to and see your stuff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, always, I do, the website's always there and it's tomflemingartwork.com. And all my announcing and new paintings and everything is through Facebook and Instagram. Facebook, The Art of Tom Fleming. If you're an art director, you could just go to my personal page, Tom Fleming. I reserve, they only let you have 5,000 follow friends, and I save like a dozen for art directors and professional connections.
Oh,
Um,
I'm a friend.
yep. Um, but the Art of Tom Fleming on Facebook and Tom Fleming Art on Instagram is where I do all my announcing and everything.
Very cool. Well, do you have any last words? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, that was a really fast hour and 15 minutes or so.
I know.
So yep. If anybody else wants to hear more, I have unlimited stories
Yes,
throughout
you
the
do.
years, and
Well,
which I'm sure you'll get an earful at IluxCon when we're sitting
yes.
around, all of us eating dinner and stuff.
Well, God, maybe I should do one at a LuxCon with everybody. That would be fun.
Hey,
Or
that's
a
not a
beer
bad
too.
idea.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
yeah, shorter happy hour. Ah,
Okay, so when you said that, the
yeah,
happy hour like concept, I love it. Sitting around with a drink and stuff. The only problem with happy hour for me is Fridays, weekends are really tough for me to, put the hour aside and stuff because
yeah,
I just always have plans on Fridays and Saturdays for the most part. So
yeah.
that's it. It's a matter of being able to do it. Um, but I absolutely love the idea.
We'll figure it out someday. I'm sure some hella awesome stories will come out during that.
Yeah.
But
Oh my God. Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna wrap this up though. But thank you so, so very much, and have an awesome rest of your day. And yeah, look forward to LuxCon.
Sounds good. Travel safe, and if we don't talk before then, we'll definitely see you up there in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again, Tom.
All right,
Take
Susan. Yep.
care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.